Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Ojibwe hockey player Taffy Abel played his first NHL game for the New York Rangers almost a century ago. He is acknowledged as the first Native American NHL player. But his legacy is clouded because he didn't reveal his Native identity publicly, fearing backlash that could jeopardize his career. Today we'll hear about a push to fully recognize Abel as the man who broke the NHL color barrier. We'll have that discussion right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bull, sitting in for Antonia Gonzalez. Donations are pouring into Bethel Search and Rescue in the wake of the catastrophic storm that hit the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta over the weekend. As KYUK's Evan Erickson reports, the building has been buzzing with volunteers and recent evacuees, some of whom have lost everything.
At the Bethel Search and Rescue building, families from villages hit hardest by Sunday's storm grab items from long tables overflowing with clothes and essential goods.
There was one I just had spoken with. He had mentioned that he can finally change his clothes.
Volunteer Caitlin Andrew says her father and other family members are still sheltering in the coastal community of Gwigilingak. The storm, remnants of Typhoon Halong, nearly completely destroyed the village, and roughly 400 people sheltered at the school awaiting evacuation on Tuesday evening.
They're messaging us and letting us know what they need over there right now.
Andrew says that within an hour of opening the donation center on Monday, totes and bags from community members quickly filled up the corner of the one-story building.
That pile over there was literally almost to the ceiling until we started organizing things.
The donations include winter boots, baby formula, and basic hygiene products, shampoo, toilet paper, and tampons. Most of the items are going directly to people already evacuated to Bethel. Some are being boxed up and sent to those still sheltered in coastal villages. Volunteer Angie Walter stacks 3 boxes filled with clothes for a family in the Nelson Island community of Nightmute.
The bottom box is mostly boots, and there's hats and gloves, pants and tops for a boy and a girl, and I guess maybe the dad and the mom.
Volunteers say that with winter just weeks away, more cold weather gear is needed. While some communities will be able to rebuild what was lost, others face a bleak future or total uncertainty of whether their community will ever recover. Andrew, who still has family members stuck in the most affected area, says that all she and other volunteers can do is offer their support for people grappling with the concept of leaving behind their traditional homes.
Some of them don't want to because that's where they grew up and that's their home. And so I think it's just to be there for them and to make sure that they know that they have a place.
Meanwhile, outside of the building, volunteers scramble to make space for roughly 10 pallets of goods that have just arrived from Anchorage. The donations are coming in from all over, and volunteers say they're critical, with 100 people already evacuated to Bethel and hundreds more on the way. In Bethel, I'm Evan Erickson.
This past Monday, many cultural observances were held in honor of Indigenous Peoples or Native American Day, including an annual event at Alcatraz Island in Northern California's Bay Area. The San Francisco Chronicle reports that the Sunrise Gathering features prayer, dancing, and songs despite the many closed national parks and in protest of President Trump's plans to reopen Alcatraz as a prison. Historically, a large gathering of Native people occupied the island prison from 1969 to 1971. With the exception of 2013 during another government shutdown, the annual gathering has taken place with another one held on Thanksgiving Day. The International Indian Treaty Council hosted the event. And during this week in 1891, people mourned the passing of Sarah Winnemucca, the first Native woman who published a copyrighted work in the U.S. Her book, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims, was an autobiographical work published in 1883. Her birth name was Thokmetani, or Shellflower. This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bull.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support by Sonosky Chambers Law, championing tribal sovereignty and Native American rights since 1976. From opioids litigation to treaty rights to tribal self-governance. With offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonosky Chambers Law.
Support by AARP, whose Family Caregiver Resource Guide is available to caregivers by calling 877-333-5885 or at aarp.org/caregiver-resources.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Former National Hockey League player Clarence Taffy Abel was born at a time when the U.S. government deemed the best way to deal with Native people was to strip them of their indigenous identity. That pressure, including the threat of forced attendance at an Indian boarding school, prompted Abel and his family to conceal their Ojibwe identity. Abel went on to play hockey in the first Winter Olympics in 1924 and was the first Native American to skate professionally in the NHL. But that achievement is clouded by the fact that he hid his identity during that time. The NHL also does not recognize Taffy as the person who broke the league color barrier. Today we'll talk with people familiar with Taffy Abel's story about the fight for full recognition. And we'll be joined later by Olympic gold medalist Billy Mills, who faced enormous challenges of his own. Join us with a comment or question by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. You can also comment on our website or social media pages like Facebook or Instagram. Joining us now from Winter Haven, Florida, is George Jones. He is a retired economist, indigenous hockey historian, and the nephew of the late Clarence Taffy Abel. George, hello, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Hello, Sean. Thanks for having me on. I am very happy to be there. And, you know, what I call the Taffy story is not the Taffy Abel story. I use 3 words, the unseen warrior story, because he had to racially pass as a white person to survive. Okay. And that's how I refer to him, is the unseen warrior. Yeah.
The unseen warrior. Well, that's a good place for us to start the conversation, George. Tell us more. Who was your Uncle Taffy, and what can you tell us about his gift for playing hockey as the unseen warrior?
Yeah, he really, you know, started playing hockey when he was about 10 years old. I have a cherished photo of him when he was 15, playing with 4 other friends, and one of the other players went on to the NHL too. So he started out young. Then there was a hockey arena in the Sioux, the American Sioux, that burnt. So if he wanted to continue his intense amateur hockey playing, he had to go to Minnesota. So he played in both St. Paul and Minneapolis, and he did extremely great. And one of the people that know hockey people, a guy by the name of Conn Smythe, actually recruited him to the New York Rangers. But Conn Smythe had also seen him play in the Olympics. So he knew what Taffy Abel was all about. And he didn't know that he was native, because Taffy had light enough skin, though he could pass as a white. And if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have got into the Olympics. And I can assure you, he would not have gotten into the NHL. But he did, and he won 2 Stanley Cups.
This is quite a fascinating story, George. Now, your uncle died in 1964. Obviously, his accomplishments were amazing during that time, those early years of professional hockey. During his life, did he ever talk about his decision with regard to his Ojibwe identity and keeping it a secret?
Well, a lot of it had to do with his school in his early years, because those were the days when an agent from the government could come knock on a family door, and Aaron knows this better than I do, that parents had no choice. You gave up your child, or you could be put in jail or fined. So they certainly did not want that for their son. So from an early age, Taffy's family decided to have him pass as a white person to survive. And let me just put this in context in another era. In Nazi Germany, in the 30s and 40s, if you were Jewish and you wanted to survive, there was one of three ways, big ways to do it. You could run. Jewish people left for, let's say, South Africa or the U.S. if the U.S. was still letting them in. You could try to hide like Anne Frank did, but still got caught. Or you could try to pass as a non-Jewish person, a Christian. So that's religious passing. So the key for Taffy was his racial passing, or how can I put it, his cover. And to me, from what I've researched, that Native American people, especially hunters, sometimes would use a wolf skin to hide under it and sneak up on buffalo and shoot them with a bow and arrow. So to me, it's kind of a inherited trait, one of survival and hunting.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, George, here you have now taken up this effort to have your uncle Taffy Abel officially recognized by the National Hockey League. Are you getting any pushback, or do you expect to?
Well, the main thing getting is the new form of racism, which is silence from the NHL. And I've hit this pretty hard. I went right to, there's 32 NHL teams, and there's a governor, like a board of director member for each team. I went to them. I went to the Washington Capitals, who we were talking about, to the second in charge as a governor, Dick Patrick. His son is now coaching. I went to Dick Patrick and told him what was going on, because his grandfather, Lester Patrick, where the Patrick Trophy in the NHL is named after, he agrees with me. And the Washington Caps put an article out because I got Taffy Abel into the U.S. National Archives, but I said, I want you to honor T.J. Oshie too, both Ojibwe. Mm-hmm. And the National Archives did that. So a writer at the Washington Caps put that out. It's up on the web. They officially came out and said, the Washington Caps did, that Taffy Abel was the first indigenous player in the NHL. And he was. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that must give you hope then. What about with the National Hockey League and its commissioner, Gary Bettman? Any dialogue there?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So there's the league and there's individual teams. With the league, as I said, the new form of racism is silence. They knew what they did was wrong. They knew that, if you look at BIPOC players, black indigenous person of color, Taffy Abel was the first in 1926. In fact, there was 8 indigenous players before the first black player, who I honor, Willie O'Ray, broke the color barrier with the black color barrier with the Boston Bruins in 1958. He played in only 45 NHL games. Taffy played in 333 and won 2 Stanley Cups, was in the U.S. Olympics, won a silver medal, was almost a gold, and he was a patriotic flag bearer. But, that's what it is.
Okay.
So, but
George, we've got to take a break in about a minute and a half, but we have time for one more question. I need to ask you, what needs to be done in your eyes now to correct this historical record, specifically with the National Hockey League?
they need to tell the truth. Plain and simple. They need to tell the truth and recognize an indigenous player, Ojibwe, Taffy Abel, and tell the truth. Something very simple, but they went to Congress and got a prestigious U.S. Congressional Gold Medal for Willie O'Ray, with not mentioning Taffy Abel had really broken the color barrier 32 years before Willie even suited up in the NHL. So I think,
Okay.
that doesn't look good for that commissioner in the NHL. So that's the best way that I can explain it. And, yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you, George, for kicking off our conversation here today on Native America Calling. We were talking about Ojibwe National Hockey League player Clarence Taffy Abel, who played in the NHL about 100 years ago and also won a gold medal in the first Winter Olympics in 1924. His nephew, George Jones, is now leading an effort to have him recognized as the first NHL player to break the color barrier. I'm sorry, he won a silver medal in the 24 Olympics. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Chanupa Hanska Luger is known for his creative, in-your-face commentaries on Indigenous visibility through sculptures, paintings, large-scale installations, and performances. He now has a new graphic novel/art book that plays on past military survival manual formats. We'll hear from him about his many creative projects on the next Native America Calling.
Once agnixi mankuwazan ye apiki yaniktelo. La kozani wawoki ki oboglakayo takucha yakachriki onichiapiktelo. Isama soliachihanta. Lilyayo healthcare.gov/nishlilyayo. Nishlil mas aphayo 1-800-318-2596. Lewot khaniki Medicare and Medicaid otietahi apelo.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. Today we're talking about what Clarence Taffy Abel accomplished as the first Indigenous and first non-white player in the National Hockey League. His descendants are seeking to have his accomplishments fully recognized by the league and the greater sports world. You can join our conversation today with a comment or a question by calling 1-800-996-2848. Hockey fans, former hockey players, present hockey players, hockey is a very popular sport in some Indigenous communities in the Midwest, upper Midwest area, and of course our First Nations relatives throughout Canada. Give us a call if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's hear now from journalist Charles Fox. He wrote an article for ICT News that brought our attention to Taffy Abel's story. Fox says he was drawn to the topic because it isn't the typical tale of an athlete confronting racial barriers. But he says that doesn't mean Abel's accomplishments are any less significant.
it's a little bit of a different barrier breaking story. And a lot of people, I think, have trouble with it because he hid his heritage. They kind of look down on that, and they really shouldn't, because what he did was the only way he was going to be able to succeed. They shouldn't fault him. They should fault a system that was very racial in the federal government, in the NHL, and other leagues.
Is there a conflict between recognizing the first black player who played in the NHL? Of course, that would be Willie O'Ree, and recognizing Clarence Taffy Abel as the first Native player. Do you think those two are on par with each other based on everything you've explained so far?
It's complicated because every one of the major leagues kind of handles race differently. You know, you look at Major League Baseball, and they didn't have a problem with Native Americans. I mean, you had early players like John Myers and Albert Bender, Jim Thorpe, who had a, so-so major league career, but they had an issue with black players. And, so there was a period of like 57 years where, in the modern major leagues where they wouldn't allow black players. So they obviously saw Native players and black players. There does seem to be a degree that they kind of breaking the color barrier becomes a black and white thing. And it really shouldn't be, because all players of color had to endure a lot. So when you look at Taffy and you look at Willie O'Ree, Taffy comes into the league in 1926, Willie O'Ree in 1958, but in between there's Larry Kwong, an Asian player, and 8 Indigenous Canadians that come in. So it's like, how do you not honor them as well, or honor them to the same degree? Taffy didn't endure it on a day-to-day basis because he racially passed, and I think that's another issue that people have, with Taffy, that he didn't have to endure the daily harassment, the death threats, the racial epithets.
He was white passing, obviously, as a child. At some point, when did he no longer pass as white?
He made a promise to his mother, who was Ojibwe, that he would keep it a secret, until she passed away. He started a youth league in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, where he was from, called the Sioux Indians. And that was kind of his acknowledged as his coming out as a Native individual.
How do you reconcile Taffy's career with someone like Jim Thorpe?
I mean, it wasn't on the same scale as Thorpe. And when I first started doing this story, I had to go back and read parts of one of Thorpe's biographies because two things jumped out at me. One, Thorpe was in the 1912 Olympics, and I knew that there were other Native athletes in the 1904 and 1908 Olympics. So it was kind of like, why was there an issue with Taffy having to hide his Native heritage in 1924? And I think the difference was most of those athletes were students at the Carlisle Indian School, like Thorpe and Louis Tawanama. It was very good public relations for the federal government. They could say, look, our boarding schools are doing great. We're turning out world-class athletes. Taffy didn't have that going for him, and it was a sport that had a segregated reputation.
What's the momentum for recognizing Taffy Abel's accomplishments as the first Indigenous person to play in the NHL? Who makes that decision, and is this more than just one person's vision?
The NHL and the New York Rangers never responded to me. They never answered my phone calls. They never responded to emails, which is unfortunate because it would be nice to get their side of the story. And I think they would say, well, the early records of the NHL aren't real good. Who's to say there weren't other players, Indigenous players racially passing? I think they would throw out a lot of question marks. And I think that's unfortunate. There was a person I quoted in my story, Eric Hammerstrom. His quote was like a beam of sunlight, that came through in the story, and that I wish we wouldn't get caught up in like, well, who was first? Because I think all these racial pioneers had to endure a lot. And, he talked about, we look at history as being a straight line, and it's really not. It's more like a pendulum, and there's always barriers to break. And Taffy broke his barriers in a way that he had to. Willie O'Ree broke his barriers, and they both should be honored.
Let's talk more about Abel's accomplishments. You already mentioned, of course, first Indigenous NHL player, but Olympic career and other notable accolades as well. What can you tell us?
Well, his one quote was, he was in the business of winning. And, you look at his track record, and it's hard to beat, silver medalist in the first Winter Olympics, Second year in the NHL, his team wins the Stanley Cup. Later on in his career, he gets traded to the Chicago Blackhawks, who were, not a good team. And before his career is over, they win a Stanley Cup. So that's an amazing track record, for any athlete.
What should we be keeping an eye on going forward with regard to Taffy Abel and his legacy?
I'd like to see them honor Taffy because he went through a different experience than Jackie or Willie O'Ree, but it was still a lot of hardships. I mean, just growing up, knowing that any day maybe somebody would make a slip of the tongue and you would be taken off to a boarding school. And there were things to avoid. And it was a different type of courage to kind of keep that inside of you. It may not have been the harassment on a daily basis that Willie O'Ree or Jackie Robinson or others endured, but he should be acknowledged and honored.
That is journalist Charles Fox, who wrote a story for ICT News about Taffy Abel and the fight for recognition we're talking about today. And let's continue that discussion with another guest who joins us now from the Little Traverse Bay Band Reservation in Petoskey, Michigan, Aaron Payment. He is a tribal councilman and former chairperson for the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. He is from the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. He's been a guest on the show many times. Aaron, hello. Welcome back.
Ani bonjour. I'm at an intertribal meeting, and so I had to step out. All of the tribes are represented here, and I'm happy to be on the Little Traverse Reservation because I'm 1/8 Little Traverse as well.
Well, Aaron, we appreciate you stepping out of that important dialogue to join our dialogue today. And let's begin with a hockey arena in Sault Ste. Marie named for Taffy Abel. How else is he remembered in northern Michigan communities?
It's not often that, people go to the Olympics. Billy Mills is going to be on later. He's one of my heroes. I ran cross country in college, and Billy, who's somebody who I patterned my career after. But so hockey is huge in Sault Ste. Marie. We are the original Hockey Town USA. And so over the years, we knew about Taffy Abel our whole lives. And, I want to say something about the passing as white is, sometimes in tribal communities, we've got the same issue with like light-skinned black people, dark-skinned black people, and some of the internal and lateral racism and violence against our own people. But most of us are mixed. If we're honest about it, we're mixed. I'm half Indian, I'm half white. And so I'm dark-skinned, so I couldn't pass as white. But you can't blame families, especially at a time when they were stealing our children and putting them in boarding schools for passing as white. No parent is going to want their child to be racially harassed or punished in school. In our community, there was a time when the police used to beat up our Indian people if they went downtown. So you can't blame Taffy's mom and the family for passing. But we do have, and we did recognize, my tribe donated a very large contribution to the local college, national champs, Lake Superior State University several times in hockey, and they named the hockey arena after Taffy Abel. So we had a little bit of something to do with that, and we're very proud of that. Taffy is very well known in our community, and he's celebrated by both tribal and non-tribal people alike.
Aaron, Taffy Abel's legacy, do you feel it would be different if he were recognized more broadly as the man who broke the NHL color barrier?
I think so. I think, for whatever reason, they're tripping up over, his either not being identifiably Native or whatever, whatever the reason is, I guess. There's some racism involved in all of that. I think that's his story is a story that deserves to be told. We watched, I learned about Billy Mills through Running Brave, and he became my role model, and we're longtime friends, 30-year friends, and he's done great things for our community. But if we had that same sort of recognition of Taffy, tribes across the country, most people aren't going to know that he was in the first Winter Olympics, that he was a silver medalist in the first Winter Olympics in 1924, and ironically, that's the first year American Indians were recognized as citizens. Prior to that, we weren't even considered humans. We had to become Christianized in order to be considered human beings. We were considered less than civilized. We were less intelligent. All of the same racist things that they consider about African American people we faced. So, it really would be a threshold moment to say, oh, yeah, well, geez, I didn't know there was an Ojibwe Olympian in 1924 and broke the color barrier in 1924.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. What do you know about what Taffy Abel was like as a person outside of his sports career?
So I know that, so I had to do a little research on this because we've always known him as two things. I've known him as an Olympic champion. We have his picture figured prominently in our administration building, and he's in his hockey uniform. But also he's a cousin. He descends from Chief Gurno, who signed the 1836 treaty. And so he's a cousin of mine through the Gurno family that ties to the Josephs. So and then the Indian name was Nedamup. So he's a cousin of mine. And so George, who's on the line earlier, is a cousin too. But we already know who he is, and he's celebrated. The Sioux Indians was the team that he created, and that lasted for many, many years. And then my tribe bought that franchise in the early 90s when we built an Olympic arena. When we first got the resources to build our own recreation facilities, we built a NHL rink and an Olympic-sized rink on the other side, and that's called our Big Bear Arena. It's a center for hockey for our community. We have several hockey rinks in Sault Ste. Marie because we're a hockey town. We have the Old Puller downtown that Taffy Abel played there. He also played at the Canes Arena. And then we have the Taffy Abel Arena. So hockey is really big in our community. And just a couple years ago, we had another Sault Ste. Marie person who went to the Olympics, and she got a silver medal as well. And that's Abby Rock. I went to school with her father. He was a national hockey champion when I ran cross country. We were friends in college. So we're very proud of her too.
Aaron, after Taffy Abel's playing career was over, any insights into what he did after that?
Yeah, so a lot of what I learned about all of that, I learned through talking to Charles Fox, and I'm just so grateful that he dedicated a lot of effort. We started talking about Taffy's life and writing the story probably about 4 years ago when I was chairperson, so I appreciate that. So I don't know a lot other than, the struggle with passing as white. And he made a promise to his mom because his mom did not want him to be singled out and to be treated badly, probably didn't want him to be stolen and taken away to a boarding school. And life is just easier if you're passing. And, I'm dark-skinned, and again, I don't begrudge anybody in the past that passed. We have a lot of people in our community that are tribal now that didn't recognize their heritage in the past, and some people have an attitude about that, but I don't, because you got to recognize the times and just the real severe sort of racial hatred that people faced. So we have to have grace and give grace. In our traditions, we believe that we are all part of who we are, and that everybody belongs and we're all responsible for each other. There's a traditional teaching about that. So I'd hold no judgment about that, and I welcome people when they come back and they recognize their heritage. And Taffy did that. So after his mom passed away, he more publicly acknowledged who he was, and I'm grateful for that.
Aaron, is it safe to say that it was perhaps not that uncommon for Ojibways and maybe other Native American people too during that era to hide their identity?
Yes, and I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble. I'm an elected official, right? So I always got to worry about my next vote. But I would say that when I grew up, because again, I'm dark-skinned, and I lived in the rural slum where we didn't have indoor plumbing. It was an Indian community. There was only a few white people that lived in our community that were married to Indian people. And so I dropped out of high school because I didn't feel like I was welcome there. And I failed out of high school. And I went on to get a bachelor's, 3 masters, and a doctorate. So there was a failure, but it wasn't a failure in me. It was a failure in the public schools and the racism that we endured. So a lot of people that are prominent members of our tribe today were French Canadian, or they were Italian at one time. But again, I don't hold any judgment against them, because if they could pass and avoid their children from being punished in school, that's exactly what they should have done. And I'm grateful that they endured, and I'm grateful that they're back in the fold, and they're very proudly part of our tribe today.
Aaron, since the Charles Fox article was published, has there been any shift in the momentum to recognize Taffy Abel?
Yeah, I think that coming on here is going to help that. So George has been working on this for a long time. And I'm going to try to hook in my cousin Angeline, who's the Firekeeper's Daughter author. A lot of her book really kind of talked about, Indian hockey in her first book, and she's a bestseller now again on her third book, Sisters in the Wind. So we have to launch a campaign, and it's going to take all-out effort because, a lot of times it is black and white, and racial recognition. Oftentimes we're called the invisible American, or the minority's minority, and we often get left out. So we do need to launch a campaign. Most of it's out of ignorance, probably only a little bit out of racism, but we have a job to do, and we do want him recognized. And so you have an ally here, and I'm going to keep pushing as much as I can until he does get recognized.
Okay, we appreciate Aaron Payment and George Jones for sharing the story of Taffy Abel with us here today on Native America Calling. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and we will speak with Olympic gold medalist Billy Mills. Stay with us.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show.
You're listening to Native America Calling. We're talking today about milestones in Native sports history. Join us with a comment or question, 1-800-996-2848. If you don't feel like picking up the phone, you can always connect with us through social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Blue Sky, we have Threads, and of course we've got our website as well, nativeamericacalling.com. We always appreciate when listeners engage with us on social media, so please use those platforms as well. We encourage healthy, robust dialogue with our audience here on Native America Calling. And again, the phone number for those who would like to give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. I want to go back to George Jones one more time in Winter Haven, Florida. He is the nephew of the late Clarence Taffy Abel. And George, you have described that after Taffy Abel's career ended, his hockey career, that he did struggle. You've described him in interviews as being sad. What do you remember about that time in his life, and what do you think was behind it?
Well, I remember all the times, both good and sad. I knew he was a great man. My personal DEI is decency, empathy, integrity. He had all of that. And he taught me a lot. He taught me how to hunt. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to box. He taught me how to defend myself if I had to. And, what I remember of him today is not the physical Taffy. So that I thank him for.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, George, when your uncle is compared to Jim Thorpe?
Well, it's not that far off, because Jim Thorpe was the first, not the first, but one of the first Native Americans in the Summer Olympics. And he was the most notable one with 2 gold medals. In the Winter Olympics, which really didn't start till 1924, 12 years later, my uncle, Taffy Abel, the unseen warrior, was the man. First Native American in the Winter Olympics. Now, with the struggle we have with the National Hockey League recognizing Taffy Abel, no problem with the Olympics, IOC. They got aboard like 2 or 3 years ago, got letters from them, congratulations and everything. So, we got that. But now we're on the second part here, on the professional part, National Hockey League. And I'm not giving up the fight,
Okay.
And I'm glad to hear that Aaron and others will be in it too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, George, for adding a little bit of additional insight here. We're going to pivot now, and the phone lines are still open for folks who would like to join the conversation. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Fair Oaks, California is Billy Mills, 1964 Tokyo Olympics track and field gold medalist. He remains the only American to win the Olympic 10,000-meter run. He is Oglala Lakota. Billy Mills, good morning, and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Good morning. I've thoroughly enjoyed what I've been listening to.
I have too. Yeah, it was fascinating, especially listening to the one reporter who mentioned Louis Tewanima, who also medaled in the 10,000-meter run. Although he didn't win gold, he won a silver. How about that? Billy, I want to ask you, of course, 2 days ago was the 61-year anniversary of your gold medal run at the Tokyo Olympics. Of course, that is a monumental achievement for any athlete of any color. It still stands today. Let's go back to that day, October 14th, 1964, you standing on the podium. Did you think then that people would still be talking about this 6 decades later?
Uh-oh.
Billy, what do you want to tell our listeners? Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you know that. So what was the last thing you said to me?
Oh, I just want to go ahead. I would just like you to share some of your thoughts with our listeners. When you were standing on that podium in 1964, you had that gold medal around your neck. Did you think people would still be talking about this all these years later?
Yeah, when I stood on the victory stand, there was conflict. When they played the national anthem, I felt honored. I felt humbled. I felt proud, but I also felt I did not belong, and it bothered me so deeply why I felt I didn't belong. But I understood. On my way to California from Camp Pendleton from Virginia, there's my wife and I and our one daughter at the time. And I remember going through Gallup, New Mexico, late at night, officer in the Marine Corps, going to 4 different motels. And as I would walk in, they would turn the vacancy sign to non-vacancy, that they're sold out. And I go back to the very first one. I told my wife to go in. And Patricia went in, came out smiling and said, they told me we had lots of rooms. And she's white, and it was her first exposure to systemic racism, which can be totally innocent to the person giving the racism, but devastating to the person receiving it. And I just my heart went out to Taffy Abel because I came back from the Olympic Games and a couple major corporations wanted to hire me, one in particular, and they would train me in every facet of the company to where I could become one of the vice presidents. And then the gentleman said he was Native American, but he's never told anybody. And if I repeated it to somebody, he would tell them I'm lying. And I could see the pain and the hurt in him. So I commend Taffy for what he did for Indigenous people once he acknowledged and let the hockey world know that he was Indigenous.
Yeah, this is it's moving, Billy, to hear you describe your experiences. I mean, you've been such an inspiring voice for so many years, for so many of us as Native people. I sure hope things have changed, at least to some degree, since then. Have you noticed improvement in the challenges we face as Native American people, specifically with some of these racism issues now here in 2025?
I think 2025. I think that says it. America's in a major change, much further down the line than I think many of us realize. And when I hear comments about all of the black and brown children, young boys born, they're born criminals. Our leadership has to take a strong role in our voices being heard. They need to take the strong role paralleling in Taffy. America, Indigenous leadership needs to go to the Hockey League and say, he's one of ours. Mm-hmm. We want him recognized. But that is on a much larger scale. We need to do that. And the seventh generation of my tribe, my ancestors, is in the classrooms today. And they're much stronger if they know the diversity of the student next to them. And America needs to hear the voice of its Indigenous people. Our seventh generation are the first to take our culture, our traditions, our spirituality, our language, and our dream into the classroom and help choreograph the horizon of America's future if we can get beyond the goals and objectives of Project 2025.
Billy, I'm glad you mentioned the importance of classrooms because you have a children's book released this past year. It's titled Wings of an Eagle. Tell our listeners, what is the message of this book?
The message of the book is twofold. I want to promote global unity through the dignity, character, beauty of global diversity as the future of humankind, if we choose, and also the core of our democratic experiment as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to get there, my mom died and my dad told me I had broken wings. It takes a dream to heal broken wings. And it takes you down a path where you find a passion in life. You develop the skills to equal the passion. You bring them together and boom, magical things can happen. So I wrote the book along with Donna Janelle Bowman, who's just an incredible lady, with S.D. Nelson, a descendant of Sitting Bull, being the illustrator. We wrote a book to try to let every young child know in the classroom that their dream has the right to be supported. And they individually are much stronger if they know the diversity of the student next to them.
Billy, what was your reaction when you learned about Jim Thorpe's gold medals being reinstated recently?
Wow. Jim Thorpe, people are always saying, oh, is Jim Thorpe your hero? Jim Thorpe was not my hero. He was one of my gods. He's an Olympic god. I think we need to our leadership and using our dollars from the economic wealth of many of our tribes, we need to focus on our young children. They need to know who Jim Thorpe is. We need to know, for example, who Taffy is. If we have opportunities to use those names to inspire our children. I was inspired. Jim Thorpe was my God, Olympic God.
Uh-huh.
But I was inspired by another Native American, the decathlon man, Buster Charles, who was fourth at the games. And my dad used to tell me about Buster Charles. So in the book Wings of an Eagle, there's a photo of Jim Thorpe, my Olympic God, a photo of Buster Charles, and I'm looking at them, making the comment how I can see myself in them.
Oh, that's amazing. Billy, you mentioned not just a hero, but a God. Who are some of your other gods, either coaches, athletes, or family members who've inspired you throughout your life?
Oh, my gosh. I would have to say my sister Margie and my sister Moni. I was raised by two indigenous women, 16 years of age, 18 years of age, seeking their rites of passage into womanhood, trying to find out who they are. And yet, being orphaned at that time, my mom died when I was 8, my dad when I was 12, they took charge of me and sacrificed so much of their lives. And they inspired me. They inspired me to dream a dream. They didn't know what my dad had, but it's almost as if the Creator was putting words into them, reminding me of what my dad told me: follow your dream. And then my older brother Sid, he was always like the captain of the Mills team. he inspired me. But then I go to coaches. Tommy Thompson Sr., a Canadian, U.S. citizenship, gold medalist in 1920 at the Olympic Games in the high hurdles, world record holder. He was the first. This sounds so cruel, but he was the first white man I trusted, and he took me in 11 months to 5 American records, 1 world record, 1 gold medal, the last 4 months of 1964, ranked number 1 in the world, 10,000 meters. The first 7 months of 65, ranked number 3 in the world in the 10,000 and number 3 in the world in the 5,000. So my career with major health issues were 11 months, the last 11 months of my 12-year running. And I owe that to Tommy Thompson Sr.
All right. Billy, I've been absolutely honored to talk with you today. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with our listeners and share your story. And again, just congratulations, and I appreciate you so much. We all appreciate you so much for what you have done for Native people.
But thank you, and maybe I can close with what inspired me most of all. I was told by my dad to follow the Lakota virtues and values, and that has made all the difference.
Thank you again, Billy Mills. And I also want to thank our other guests who joined us today, George Jones, Aaron Payment, and Charles Fox. Please tune into the show again tomorrow when we talk with interdisciplinary artist Chanupa Hanska Luger, who is this month's Native in the Spotlight. I'm Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Now more than ever, the supporters of this and all Native One programs deserve a little extra love. Learn more about all our public radio underwriters and web-based sponsors at kowanik.org/supporters-spotlight.
Support for journalism that raises the awareness of child well-being to citizens and to policymakers provided by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, building a brighter future for children, families, and communities. Information at aecf.org.
Skugtash oigamo uchuchuga go toiba gudoki. Owumanyo gokojamaki makai kosmaimo asmasma uchuchuga guipi mumkita. Cancer, Tastio Asapu Muhuja, Ambite Smati Monique Healthcare.gov/coverage. Omaguga the Kumako Gigi, Sikort, Y Kumako Gigi, Gog Hutas Humuk Ju, Ida Amjet Himaka Medicare to Medicaid Hajipka.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico, by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.